Brothers, sisters, and others of all colors, welcome back to another YouTube video. This time, I got this, what would I say, I get this feeling to talk about imposter syndrome, um, because it's been floating around in my mind now that I kind of understand what's happening. And, yeah, this is a message to those who deal with imposter syndrome, okay? So the first thing to recognize is that imposter syndrome is imposter syndrome is something that we made up in more than one way, okay? That's not to say it's not, like, valid. Of course it's valid, right? But, another thing is, like, you if you determine the validity of things based on solely on their physicality or their ability to be represented as material, um, then you limit yourself. And sometimes limitations are good, and sometimes limitations are bad. It really depends on the nature of this limitation, the consciousness that one takes, and the awareness that one takes towards the limitation that is created. The reason why the limitation is created. But anyways, we'll get into that in a second. The first thing we need to talk about is the concept of containment. Okay? It's very important to understand what I'm getting at, because, well, we'll get to that. All right. So containment. Let's say you have a small burlap sack, okay, and you want to fit it inside of you want to fit a big ass boulder in it, okay? You want to put the boulder in the sack, okay? What do you got to do? You got to break the boulder down. You got to put it inside of the burlap sack, and the amount of boulder that you can fit inside of the sack, okay, is limited by the size of the sack. If you have a larger burlap sack, you can fit more of the boulder in it. Boom. So, containment constrains. If you have one thing inside of another, it constrains that thing. And of course, this can be used intentionally. It's not always a bad thing, as per usual, but it's an important part of the equation nonetheless. The next thing we have to talk about is perception. Containment, well, I guess we'll start with containment and how it relates to perception. Basically, as human beings, we're somewhat limited by our ability to perceive of the things that that we wish to affect, right? Just because you can see a letter doesn't mean that you know what that letter actually means and how to read, okay? So, well, that's not perception necessarily, but that's one part of it, I guess. I would consider that to be consciousness. So, let's see. When it comes to perception, right? The only thing that I know is there, right, for sure, is what's in front of me. I mean, arguably, okay? And even that's pretty limited because, well, I'm only seeing it from one particular point of view that my brain is reading. So, like, there's the perception point, right? There's, like, what I can see, and then there's my brain interpreting it. Interpreting the information, and then, like, what I want affects how I interpret that information. And yeah, I know, whatever, right? You gotta be objective, or whatever people say, facts over feelings. What is that? But the fact of the matter is that what you want will almost always affect your perception in some way, shape, or form. So, well, there's a lot more that will affect it based off of like, okay, well, what do I think is the mechanism behind this thing? What are the things involved, etc. There's probably 1,000 things that limit one's ability to perceive things, or that affect the interpretation of things. So that's the next point. Now, it's important to recognize that this idea of containment also applies to non-physical objects in the same way that it applies to a physical object. The amount of potential in non-physical objects is massive, right? It's nearly imperceptible. But the more stuff you add to it, the more it gets contained, and the smaller the smaller it becomes, basically. So in essence, and then your ability to perceive of that thing also affects its containment. But that's a topic for another time. The next thing we need to talk about is sort of the object that is doing the containment, and the perception that is leading, or the perception that limits that containment. So essentially, and then this is mostly a shot in the dark, if I'm being honest, that, you know, when you have imposter syndrome, there's some person or entity or group that determines your worth based off of your accomplishments. And this is like a ridiculously big deal. This is a huge deal. And the reason why is because, first of all, you can't perceive of these people or this group or this person all of the time. So, you know what happens is you make an object in your brain that's like, okay, this is my object for what other people think of me. I do this too. I think everybody does this on some level, whether they're conscious of it or not. So there's this idea of what somebody thinks of you, and it's an object in your brain. An idea of what maybe a specific person thinks. And as you talk to them, you store sort of the data from that into this object, and you adjust it accordingly. And then you use that object as a way to, as a way to judge or gauge your own accomplishments, or judge or gauge, so, and to also judge your value. So because of this, you're not only limited by what they perceive to be important or valuable, but you're also limited by your ability to perceive what that is. But then you're also limited by your ability to connect to these two things, right? So check this shit out. If your value and their value do not coincide, that's a whole other layer of limitation that you're putting on yourself. It's fucked up. It's really fucked up. And it's not like you can go out of your way to get that information, because you created that information because you created the information for that other person object because you were afraid. So basically you're diving into the lion's den, you know, to limit yourself, or to give you a little bit more space, a little bit more freedom within your own damn mind. It doesn't make any fucking sense. And I don't say that to be like mean. I'm mostly saying that because it's messed up, right? It's just messed up. Um, in a lot of ways. And it's not even like it's your fault necessarily or even theirs. It's just the way that they had to operate too on some level. But now's the time. Now's the time to get the hell out of that shit. So how does this relate to imposter syndrome at all? I totally forgot to mention that. Well, I mean, if you have imposter syndrome, you probably can already tell, how that is. But to spell it out more plainly, it's like the real imposter is not you. You're not the imposter. The object that you created that limits yourself is the imposter. That is what shouldn't be there. Because that object or that thing in your mind just doesn't belong there. It doesn't. Like, it's not from this time period. It's only limited by, or it's also limited, by the way, by you, who limits yourself, which limits itself, aka recursion. So it's also limited in its ability to perceive and depends on you. It's feeding off of you. This thing in your mind, or at least the attachment to that thing, right? The thing isn't bad, and you probably won't get rid of it because now it's a part of your entire life. And it might be helpful. You never know. But, and I can get into some of my own at some point, but for now, let's get back to the topic. The fact of the matter is that you're not the one who doesn't belong there. You're clearly smart enough to make it into the room, and that's why you're in the room to begin with. You have the capacity to do what the people in that room do. It's not that you don't want to. It's that what you want to do is limited by, probably unconsciously, what some other bozo that's a little bit of, okay, not a bozo, okay? Although my own loose attachments to the people around me drive me to use such language, alright? I don't mean to imply these people are all bozos, okay? But they certainly don't have the same life experience. Even if they are just as intelligent as you, the environment they grew up in is drastically different. It's drastically different from what they're used to, and their abilities and what society perceived to be important at those times had also limited their ability to see what exactly you can see and what exactly you're capable of. So yeah, regardless of how intelligent they are, it doesn't matter. It's still limited through like what that person's life was, regardless. So anyways, bozo or not bozo, it's this super limiting construction does not belong here. That's what it is. It belongs in the past. Their thoughts belong with them and should be updated solely, for the sake of understanding them, and your value is only for the sake of your value. And it always has been, by the way. That's why this whole fucking thing happened to begin with. Because you were just trying to protect yourself. And regardless for whatever petty reason it was, or however you perceive petty to be in your case, You know, maybe it wasn't petty. Maybe it was, or maybe other people wouldn't consider it petty at all. Maybe it was like to avoid like being hurt physically by your parents or your guardian or whoever this person may be, or this group, you know, belittlement or shame, or, you know, being rejected or ostracized, right? I don't really like the whole idea of being rejected, or being anything that involves someone else. It's complicated how the mechanics of that work. But in essence, the object doesn't belong. That's what doesn't belong. And the thing that you got to understand is that, you know, you make the object. You made the thing. And, you know, you can just as easily release its control from you. Once you realize what that was, seeing that cat's around here, I don't want to disappoint, but seeing what that was, and why it was there, and how it can help you in the future is a great first step to getting rid of this shit. Alright. Now, this is a new thing, okay? No one who's ever seen a video on this channel knows about this yet, because I don't really upload as often as I should. But the important thing to know is that I have like 30 doctorates. You have to say doctor 30 times before saying my name. It's true. And I get a new doctorate every time. So that's the new meme. That's the new meme, okay? But yeah, you know, I just so happen to not have a doctorate, okay, in having a degree in psychology. Holy shit. Okay, sorry. It's just too good. But yeah, I just so happen to like not have a doctorate and having a degree in psychology. So yeah. I don't know. Consult your psychologist friend or whatever for that. I'm just somebody who's done so much goddamn introspection that, you know, I've learned a lot about I've learned a lot about the brain through my own brain, basically. And through a lot of other, like, content, right? I've watched a lot of different things and just sort of amalgamated them. But, yeah, that's how I've sort of pieced together, or that's part of how I pieced together how this works. Basically, you're just as capable as everybody around you, and that's why you're there. The crazy thing is in the reason why I believe this the way I do, is that in spite of this crazy limitation that you've created in your own mind, the real part of you is still totally able to do the things that you've done to get to this point. Even if it's just like, you know, getting straight A's or going to some prestigious college, alright? Even if it's getting B's in some prestigious college or anything like that, right? That's still crazy. That's one more degree than I have a PhD in getting. In fact, I actually have no PhDs in getting degrees because I'm fucking just an insane person. But anyways, self-deprecating humor is another problem. Well, it's both a problem and not a problem at the same time, but that's a lot of things. So yeah, um, my message is simple. You are the maze, and you control the maze. You're the maze, you're the minotaur, and you're the person you've created inside of that maze, walking around the maze to begin with. And that through freeing your own brain from the limitations of your past and the people in it, you'll be able to do a lot more than you could even imagine. A lot more than, you could even think is possible, right? And I've learned one thing from being a gifted kid, and it's that even the few people who do believe in you, the people who do have maybe not the perfect words, but at least helpful words, even the people who do, can make a big difference at the end of the day. I've had a few teachers who did as much, who went the extra mile and did, more. And they really cared about seeing me succeed. And in some ways, I'd say I'm getting there, but there are a few people, and in spite of all of the difficulties I've had, with home life and school life, those people really, helped smooth out the curve, okay? And another thing that can be difficult to comprehend is, like, even though some people may have the desire to help you, they may not know how. But they'll shoot, they'll shoot a shot. They'll shoot their shot for sure. And you know what? You kind of got to respect that too. So the point is, but again, and I'll say it again, and I'll say it again, and I'll keep saying it. You're very capable, clearly, and the only thing that can limit your capabilities is what other people think that you should be doing, right, with your intelligence. When people tell you how to use your intelligence, it's like they can only perceive of your intelligence through the limitations of their own mind. And it's not just like intelligent people too. Even if you're like, average or below average or anything like that, it's like, and that's part of the freedom of being, average or below average. It's like, you don't have to deal with people's expectations for you, and maybe you do because of some other reason that one may feel prideful for. Like, I know that, and there's more to say about pride in general and how toxic it is, but at least my construction of what pride is, which I'll share with you guys at some other point. But when I don't say pride, I don't mean that you can't enjoy your accomplishments. You absolutely should, and you should also enjoy everything else, not just the end goal, not just the accomplishment, okay? But unfounded pride has caused a lot of problems. Or, well, not unfounded pride. All pride is technically unfounded because it's an attachment to some, it's some kind of attachment that, yeah. It's an attachment to accomplishments that, either don't belong to you or no longer belong to you. But, let's see. But yeah, it's just, those choosing, I would say, I would recommend choosing to not be limited to the minds of other people. Wow. I'm running out of juice because my vagus nerve being stimulated by my yapping has calmed me the hell down quite a bit. Now, okay. I definitely have a PhD in yapping, by the way. I feel like there's something else to say. Um, Consciousness and the ability to perceive things, okay? That's the next thing I want to talk about. So basically, if I tell you, you know, and maybe we're on a submarine or something, and I say, "Hey, turn up the frequency on the Bing Bong," okay? You might not even know what the fuck a Bing Bong is, dude. You might not know, and you know, like, and you won't even know like why that's important or what you should do about it, or why you should do it, or what that even means to do that thing to begin with. And that's also another part of perception. It's like your ability to build your own perception. Oh, yeah. I got this insight a while ago, but anyways, enough meta shit. Uh, when it comes to other people when it comes to the people around you, and the insanity of their accomplishments, it's like these are the versions of you that aren't limited by all of that shit, right? They're revealing to your own limitations, not the limitations of your mind, like in terms of like your intelligence, but the limitations that are placed upon your mind by other people, what you could be without it. Because the nature of these other accomplishments is that they exist well outside of the realm of like conventional or perceived they exist well outside of the realm of what is normally considered to be like an accomplishment, right? You know, growing up, it was like your accomplishment is when you go to school and you become the CEO, because yeah, you go to school, you get your degree, and then you become the CEO through gradually moving up a corporate ladder. That's how it was growing up for me, where that was what was considered to be an accomplishment. There was like, oh, an accomplishment is when you make a bunch of money, or when you serve the world. There was this guy, okay, little story for you guys, an optometrist. And by the way, through the collective unconscious, I'm sorry, but you're never going to hear the end of it, because I've gotten too much value from this guy's bullshit for this to be the end of it, okay? I've gotten too much value from it. So guess what? He's going to be the victim of my stories every time. Unfortunately. Yeah, I know, it sucks. But, I mean, it is what it is. So, there's this optometrist who was like, hey, you're into math. Why don't you become like us? I told him what I wanted to be, and he was like, wow, you're a waste of potential. It was crazy. You know, the type of things that people will say. I mean, like, absolute insanity. It's like, it's because, like, what he thought I should do with my time, or what he thought I should do with my intelligence was limited by his own ability to perceive of what, you know, intelligence and skill and genuine interest are used for. I was interested in math because I want to make video games, dude. And it's like, yeah, because that shit is cool as hell. So, you know, like, that's sort of where I'm going with the whole idea that some accomplishments exist outside of the realm of what other people think is accomplished, what other people think is an accomplishment. And it's also kind of limited by the intelligence of the people who are telling you what your intelligence should be and what your intelligence should be used for. That's what it's limited by. The truth is that you determine what the hell your intelligence is supposed to be used for, and you always have and you always will. And regardless of how nosy people are, it doesn't fucking matter, right? Regardless of how nosy they are, they can't really determine that for you. I got kind of upset when I read this Quora post about this guy who was super intelligent. Everybody was telling him, hey, go to NASA, be a NASA scientist. And, his choice was to spit back by becoming a regular guy, becoming like an office worker. And I feel like, god damn, that guy kind of annoyed the shit out of me. Not because he chose freedom through spite. Like, the freedom didn't exist on its own. It was just like, hey, my freedom is determined by my disdain for these people. And it's like, yeah, you could have did any number of things if you wanted to, and it's like, because in some ways I'm kind of upset with myself and how I limit my own abilities based off of, spite. Just being like, okay, well, not necessarily just like, hey, I gotta do this because I am scared. It's like, hey, I'm gonna do this because fuck you, basically. That's like that's the motivator. And it's like, that motivation, it doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't help other people, and it doesn't help yourself. It just sort of reinforces the dialectic, alright, the other way around. You can't help that other people are just going to feel the need to tell you how to live your life, okay, and how to use your gifts. You just can't avoid that. Because if you have something, people who are limited by their own sense of lack, whether it's justified or not, are going to try to butt in. And especially adults. When you're like a kid, that's like being an adult 101. Is telling your kids how to live their damn life. And if it's not your kid, you tell them how to live their life too. It's perfect. No, I'm kidding. It's not. But yeah, in this here, I hate to call it Western society, but in this particular society, it's like, if you're a kid, you just don't have freedom. Well, that's a bit overgeneralized. But like, other people want a slice of that potential, okay? That's what I'm saying. This one is, damn, I really do have a doctorate in yapping. This one's long as hell. But I think I'll release it anyways. That's all I had to say today. Alright, peace.